I had always heard about Leif Erikson and his discovery of America by the Vikings about 500 years before Christopher Columbus. But all that I ever heard was that he came to Newfoundland and then went back home. No big deal, right? I mean, that's not exactly the history-changing event that you would expect it to be. Well, it turns out there is a lot more to the story, and it's actually quite amazing. Now, if you have been here before, then you know we love to do these mythology videos. We have talked about Thor, Odin, Loki, Freya, all kinds of Asgardian gods and heroes, and today we are talking about another hero from Scandinavia, specifically Norway. In this video, we are going to talk about Leif Erikson and the lost saga of Vinland, where the Norsemen discovered America almost 500 years before Christopher Columbus. What's crazy is what they found over there may have been the real El Dorado, the legendary city of gold. You don't want to miss this one. Let's dive in. The first thing I really need to explain is, what is a saga? A saga is a type of Old Norse or Icelandic prose narrative that was written down around the 13th or 14th century. They were tales of heroic deeds and adventures, often based in Norwegian history, sometimes completely made up. Sagas often dealt with family sagas, so they would follow a family for generations, their rise and their fall. Or they could be about kings, like the kings of Norway, or they could be about the lives of saints. The sagas were originally oral stories, but then they started to get written down, kind of like an epic poem. One of the most popular sagas was the Edda. This was a collection of 27 Old Norse poems that were compiled by Snorri Sturluson. He wrote this at the request of King Haakon, who wanted to stop the endless cycle of violence among the nobility. And this work survives today as the Poetic Edda. It contains a huge amount of Norse mythology and religion, which is how we know so much about it today. Another important saga is the Prose Edda, which was also written by Sturluson. In this work, he describes the beliefs of the Norse people in the 13th century, including a lot of information about their gods and goddesses and other religious practices. So these two Eddas, along with the Elder Edda, are the foundation of our knowledge of Norse paganism. Okay, now that we have that explained, let's talk about Leif Erikson and the saga that is named after him. First off, who was Leif Erikson? He was a legendary Viking explorer who was born in Iceland around the year 970 AD. He was the son of Eric the Red, who was himself a notorious Viking. One time when Eric was younger, he killed a fellow Icelander in self-defense, but he was banished from Iceland for 3 years because of it. So Eric decided to sail west, and he found the island of Greenland, which he started to settle. He had a farm there and eventually returned to Iceland. Now, while he was in Greenland, he had a son, Leif. And as a young man, Leif was sent to France to be educated in the customs and manners of the French nobility. Now, according to the saga, while he was there, he witnessed a horrible injustice and he got angry about it. So he released the galley slaves and sailed back home to Iceland. Apparently, he was known as a handsome guy with red hair and a red beard and a special skill in poetry. He was also a Christian. But no worries, Vikings could be both a Christian and still be a total badass. Remember, this was during the time of Knut the Great, who ruled England, Denmark, and Norway. He converted to Christianity, but he still kept a lot of Old Norse traditions and culture alive. So anyway, after returning to Iceland, Leif went back to Greenland to check in on his father, but his dad had recently died. So Leif took over his estate in Greenland. Leif grew up hearing stories about the land of Vinland, which supposedly had vast amounts of fertile land and plenty of wild grapes. Grapes? Can you imagine? Wild grapes growing in North America? Anyway, apparently there were already some settlements there, but they didn't last too long. So Leif decided to go there and see if he could start a settlement of his own. We don't know exactly when he sailed, but it was probably sometime around the year 999 AD. His fleet consisted of 3 ships, and they set sail from Greenland and landed in Newfoundland, Canada. There's a place called L'Anseau Meadows that was likely the location of their settlement. There are some archaeological findings that prove that the Vikings were there, including some rune stones. Runes are letters in the Old Norse alphabet, and there are petroglyphs of runes at Lance o Meadows. If you're into cryptozoology, there's even a theory that the Vikings left behind evidence of a monster that they encountered in North America. The Champ, the Wampus, and Freshy Pete are all names for this cryptid, depending on where you hear about it. Supposedly, there are some drawings of a creature that they called Skinwalker in the Norse manuscripts, but I couldn't find any proof of this online. Anyway, there doesn't seem to have been any hostility between the Vikings and the natives, and they seem to have traded with each other. The Norse called the natives Skraelings, and they didn't seem to have any nice things to say about them. But we don't have any historical accounts from the natives' point of view, so we don't know how it went down from their perspective. But it seems like the Vikings did get along with the local tribes well enough to trade with them. The Norsemen traded with them for things like furs, copper, oxen, slaves, and, of course, wine. Yeah, I'm sure that's what they were calling it, wine. There were massive vineyards on the east coast of North America. Some people believe that there may have been some genetic mixing between the two cultures. And there are some theories that a lot of Native American place names come from the Norse, but there is no hard proof of either of those things. All good things must come to an end, though. After a few years, perhaps due to pressure from the native tribes, or maybe because they ran out of wine, the Vikings decided to leave Vinland and return to Greenland. This is where the story gets weird. When Leif returned to Greenland, he brought some grapes with him and told everybody about the wonders of Vinland, how there were grapevines growing wild everywhere. So, a bunch of guys from Greenland decided to go to Vinland themselves. They hired a guy named Tyra, who was a skilled sailor, to take them there. But when he tried to bring them to Leif's promised land of grapes, they ended up in hell. I'm not kidding. According to the Saga, they found a land that was filled with fire and brimstone, and it was full of demons. Now, there is a great story that goes along with this part of the saga. One of the guys who went on this trip was a devout Christian, and he used the devil's trident to baptize the land, and that is why it is cursed. Now, we don't know if this happened exactly the way they wrote it in the saga, but what we do know is that Tyr never made it back to Greenland. He disappeared. Maybe he took the whole group of settlers to the land that would become known as Hell, and then they all burned to death. Or maybe he just kidnapped them all and sold them into slavery. I don't know. The point is, nobody ever saw him again. Okay, one more story, and then we are done here. After this story got out, everybody in Greenland was afraid to go to Vinland. That was until another guy named Thorvald decided that he was going to go there and claim it for Greenland. Okay, so Thorvald sails to Vinland with a few friends, and when they get there, they run into a group of Skraelings, and they kill them. Then Thorvald decides that he wants to spend the winter there, and he builds a fort and settles in. Well, during the winter, he and his crew had nothing to do, so they started hunting. One day they went inland and killed a deer, and while they were skinning the deer, they found some cabins nearby. The cabins belonged to a group of Skraelings who had gone into the forest to harvest berries. While they were gone, the Vikings looted their cabins and stole their stuff. Well, the next day, when the Skraelings returned to their cabins and realized that they had been robbed, they tracked down the Vikings and attacked them. They fought for a long time, but eventually the Vikings won and they killed most of the Skraelings. Only one guy survived and he managed to escape. After this battle, Thorvald decided that he didn't want to spend another winter in Vinland. So he gathered up his men and they sailed back to Greenland. And that is the end of the saga. Now, I mentioned before that Christopher Columbus was not the first European to reach the United States. And it's pretty clear from the archaeological evidence that the Vikings were here first. But what's not clear is if any of this saga is true. Some historians claim that the entire saga was just made up to make the Norsemen look good. But there is archaeological evidence that proves that the Vikings were here, even if there weren't. Would it be so far-fetched to think that a group of elite sailors could have accidentally stumbled upon North America 500 years before Columbus? Not really. As for the part about hell and brimstone, that was most likely a metaphor to describe a swamp or something. They didn't actually mean that there was fire and brimstone falling from the sky. I'm sure that would have been pretty easy to notice. I really wish that they had actually found hell, though. Imagine the smell. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the thumbs up button. That really helps us out. Also, subscribe for more videos like this one. Thanks for watching.